Hello, family and friends, and welcome to blog number 5, weekend in the 27th of March 2022. Another week's gone by. My God, it's going quite quick. It'll soon be Christmas. Don't want to start talking and thinking along those lines, though. We know the structure now. I'll go straight into the news and then start talking about my waffle and how I'm feeling. The war, well, we all know my feelings on the war, but I'll just mention a little bit of a news article that grabbed my attention. Apparently, Russia are scaling back their invasion. Their main goal is now the liberation of the Donbas region on the east border of Russia. Now, this is different to Putin's original plan and is a sign that the war is turning or a strategy change is about to occur. Now, I've been listening to the articles now and they've changed their tone a little bit. You know, obviously we see all the devastation and everything that's going on. And sometimes I wonder, now we're in the 5th week of this, that they want to start doing some rally cries. Something that gives us hope that Ukraine is battling on and that it gives us time to rally ourselves and join in to this war. Nobody wants to join a war, but something's got to change Putin's mind in regards to this war, and anything that I think that will do that, I'm for. I still see all the bombings of innocents, and when I hear that pathways out of Ukraine into into the main Europe, I'm very happy about, but then they block those paths. Absolutely atrocious. Can't stand that. So I heard last night that the Foo Fighters drummer Taylor Hawkins died at the age of 50 yesterday. Now I know of the Foo Fighters. I've listened to some of their tracks, but I'm not a huge fan. But to hear that someone at 50 has died, always sad. At the time I heard of the death, I wasn't sure how he had died. Apparently he died close to some antidepressants and drugs. Maybe another cry for help. I'm not sure. But a very sad thing to listen to in the morning. P&O. Now, Boris Johnson has called for the CEO, Peter Heppelwaite, to step down because he's admitted this week that he broke the law on how he got rid of the 800 staff. Good for you, Boris. Absolutely atrocious. 800 is a huge number. How you get rid of your staff is equally as important as how you employ them. These people have got rights, they've got families. We're heading into an awful situation when it comes to money and how we're going to survive. Just buying food or buying heat is now a choice we have to make. So I'm not particularly interested that your company is about to go under. You probably took more shares away. Do the good thing, step down. And the last thing is always about fuel, because fuel is very important to me, because I travel to work every day in my car. We had a sort of mini budget during the week, and the Chancellor decided to take 5p off of fuel in a hope that that would help. The AA has reported that not all of that money has reached us, and that we're really seeing the benefit of about 2.7 to 3.7p of that 5p. And to be quite honest, when I heard it was 5p, I went, that's a drop in the ocean. When you consider that fuel was going up 5p every like 4 days, it was like 10p a week. That 5p was nothing. We're taxed twice on fuel in this country. I think he could have done a lot more. If it had said 20p, I'd have had a lot more respect for him. But 5p, the fuel will probably go up this week by 5p, wiping out everything that he did on Wednesday. So where's that put us? Nowhere. So absolutely useless, really. I appreciate it, but you're not doing enough. That's the news. Going through this quite quick, yay. So how am I feeling? I'm a little bit indifferent actually this week. I wanted to give you some news in regards to how my job position is going, and I've mentioned that I laid down a grievance to the company I work for, because after I was tupid across, I wasn't in the position that I thought I was going to be in, and my job title was being reduced. Now, nobody wants to file a grievance, and the only thing I was happy about was it was a grievance not against my team or individual people, but with how the process happened. So the meeting on the 22nd happened, and just like I thought, they wanted me to talk, and I'd have preferred it that they'd have listened, read my grievance and taken away another meeting that happened earlier in regards to how I was feeling and how it was making me feel, and they would have come back with something. But no, they wanted me to go answer a few more questions. The meeting lasted an hour and 15 minutes, and I told them that part of the mental health problem that I've got with this is reliving it over and over and over again. But I opened up with what I thought would be the killer statement. And I basically stated that the reason for the grievance is because what's happening at the moment will alter my career path and my earnability in the future. So what I was trying to say in that statement was, no matter what you're trying to do here, you've got to understand that taking away a manager's position and giving you a smaller role, if I wanted to go for another job outside of this company, I would have to tell them what my last job was, and that would be not as a manager. And then if you want a career moving forward, you build upon where you are, and I'm a manager, so I want to build upon that particular juncture of my career. What they're doing, even if it's a step backwards to go forwards, is just prolonging something, and then it gives them time to actually never put you in that position. I've done nothing wrong, absolutely nothing wrong. So I've stuck by my guns, and I've basically stated this is too important. You don't work for 30 odd years trying to get to a position only for it to be taken away because you've entered a bigger establishment. They've had this 12-month harmonisation process, and in that 12-month harmonisation process, they could have brought me up to speed. So I could be the manager at the end of that process that I was already. So I'm hoping that they've listened. There is now a 10-day process where they deliberate. The only thing that's happened since Tuesday was on Thursday I got a transcript of the meeting. It was 2 pages long. The bits that I was saying were mixed up. Bits that I said in the middle were at the beginning, and bits that I said at the beginning were at the end. That can alter the emphasis, so I corrected all of that, and I added in some extra notes of what I actually said, and it turned it into a 4-page document. I'm hoping I haven't killed myself by putting in so many corrections, but this is too important. Can't say any more than that. And then when it comes to my health, I actually went to the hospital just over a week ago, so it was just before the last blog, and I was told an operation is best for my knee. It's going to involve 2 small incisions into my kneecap and some tearing away of cartilage and skin from my kneecap to fix my problem. So there's no new kneecap, there's no injections, there's no siphoning out bits of bone that might be causing this problem. And he said that it's a minor operation, which is good news to me, and he told me the dangers, which as always is infection. So of course I've agreed, and now I wait for a pre-op examination before the actual operation. He did tell me that after the operation I wouldn't be able to do much walking and so forth for at least 5 days. Their operating theatre operates Wednesday to Friday. I explained to them that it'd be really good if it was on a Wednesday, if it was a choice, because then you've got Saturday and Sunday, and I could be back into work on Monday. If you go into the Thursdays and Fridays, then of course you go into the following week. I'd much prefer it, if possible, to have it on the Wednesday, so I'm back into work on the Monday. But there's an added thing to this in the fact that we're now heading into probably the busiest time when it comes to bank holidays. April is Easter. May will be 2 bank holidays, although I believe the second bank holiday, which is the end of May, is now June, because there's also a celebration of the Queen where we're getting 2 days rather than 1. So we've got a lot of holidays to look forward to. Yay, that's absolutely great. Means we can rest a little bit more. Let's hope that COVID doesn't bite so hard that we're under any more lockdowns. That's about it for me. So what have I been doing this week, and what questions can I answer? Just want to thank all the people that made some comments this week. They were Panther, Highlander, Robert Morrison, Down the Rabbit Hole, Martroid and Colin Jones. They all said some absolutely lovely things, and some of those also asked a question, but I actually was so excited that I actually answered it in text format in the actual comment, so I do apologise, but I did keep a few back, and I'll mention a few now. So Colin Jones, he basically asked me what my top 5 8-bit games are. Now, that's a very, very, very hard question, Colin. Really appreciate it. Absolutely fantastic. But it's just top 5 of the 8-bit games when you consider there were thousands and thousands of games. Now, he did say I could include arcade games, but if you think about that, where is the cutoff point on the 8-bit games turning into 16-bit games? And do I know enough to think that that particular game was 8-bit? I've done my very, very best here, and I've labelled these as my most playable favourite games, games that I go back to, games that I played more than probably any other back in the day, and not because they were actually technically fantastic, but they were. So, not in any order. I've got to include Elite. I played Elite on just about every machine that's going, but when Elite came out, I had a Commodore 64, so I probably had what some would consider the worst version, although as far as I'm concerned, there wasn't a worst version of Elite, really. It was such high quality. Anybody wants to know what Elite is, Google it, but basically it was a space trading game. It seemed huge to me at the time, and because of the way that the graphics were drawn on the screen, which were vectors, it just felt even more immense. It's a space game, so the wireframe didn't bother me one bit. Another game that I really loved playing was Whizball. Loved Whizball. The graphics were fantastic, the sound was fantastic, and it had a control mechanism that, although seemed terrifically hard at first, actually it wasn't too bad. What you had to understand was you had to destroy a few baddies with some inertia effects, and then once you got some power-ups, the movement was like many other shoot-'em-ups. And the mechanic of trying to paint the world, so it started off very dull and then turned into colour, I really liked. And the Commodore 64 is quite a nice colour computer, but the sound was just top-notch on that. To end probably computer games and go into arcades, Forbidden Forest always is something I go back to. It looks ugly. It's probably one of the most ugliest looking games you could have. But when it comes to fun, there's something about that game where it has a menacing sort of like soundtrack that changes, and you're in a forest that looks very moody and muted in its colours, and the creatures that you're after, you know, the spiders, the dragons, bees, they're all things that we all have tried to, you know, like bees swipe away, bats scared of. You know, it has that sort of like aura about it that makes me keep coming back. And although it didn't have that many levels, in fact, the forest never changed, it just changed its colours. To me, it was a variety game, and the fact that you could slightly tilt yourself to fire your arrows basically just kept me coming back for more. So, Forbidden Forest, there's another one. Arcade games. Now, the two that I go back to the most are different to my friend Mainmeister. I was big into the Space Invaders, just like a lot of people are, and Gallagher and Galaxian and all of those sort of things. But I was mesmerised by the shoot 'em up Gyrus, and I believe Gyrus is an 8-bit shoot 'em up, just about, because it's got a Z80 processor in there. But it does have custom chips, so it makes it a bit awkward. But Gyrus sort of like intrigued me because things were coming from a far distance towards you, and you were totally around the outside, spinning around like a big circle, firing inwards, and your mission was to get to Earth, and you started off on the outskirts of the solar system. So there was something to get there. There were challenge stages. The patterns that the aliens came at were different for each. I think they were for each level as well. Sometimes they'd come up through the bottom all the time, and then they started coming in from all sorts of different angles. So yeah, Gyrus, top tune as well. Barks Toccata and Fugue. It just has everything that I want in a shoot 'em up, really, apart from you could have probably when you got to Earth, made it into a horizontal or vertical shoot 'em up, because Earth, when you get there, it just then goes back to the beginning. So bit of a anticlimax. But then tell me, how many end of games aren't anything other than an anticlimax? Especially back then. Well done, back to the beginning. There are obviously exceptions, but it'd be nice to know your thoughts on that. And so the last one, Ghosts and Goblins. What can I say about Ghosts and Goblins? The moment I saw Ghosts and Goblins, and the fact that it's very Arthurian in its nature, drew me in. It's got again, killer sound effects and music. The mechanic was quite good, because although you had a set amount of lives, there were two parts to that life. You had your armor on or you had your armor off. So if you got hit, you weren't immediately dead. It's just it was damn sight harder because your armor's gone. The next hit, you were dead. So there were obviously power-ups, there was jumping, leaping, firing, but what everybody doesn't like, I think, about Ghosts and Goblins is it's damn hard. And when you get to the end, you've got to do it again before it's the actual end, so you're playing for it twice. That's definitely a coin. Let's get as much money out of you as possible. So those are my 5, and I hope those 5 is a good answer for you. I'd love to give you more, but I could go for hours possibly. Now 8-Bit Steve, he started talking about big box games. Interesting this, because obviously with the 8-bit games we bought lots of things on tape. Discs came in big box games. But tapes then started going into big boxes. So now he didn't want to know what my favourite big box was, but he wanted to know what I was impressed with when it came to the content of a big box game. Because what you have to remember back then is that sometimes they'd just put it in a big box for the fun of it. So I've mentioned a couple. Most of them were adventure role-playing games. So the first one that I was impressed with was an Infocom text adventure called Leather Goddesses of Phobos. Now, why did I find that quite good for its contents? It tried to do something a little bit different. They put a scratch and sniff card, if I remember rightly, in that box, so that when you got to a certain point in the game, it would turn around and say, now scratch block 2 on your scratch and sniff card. And basically it would be the ambience of the room that you were in. With a name like Leather Goddesses of Phobos, I'm pretty sure you can imagine one of those scratch and sniff little spots was leather. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is another Infocom adventure. I'm a very big Douglas Adams fan. The adventure game was fun, and I probably got the furthest in that adventure game than any other adventure game other than the Marvel Quest Probe series. But it was just like Leather Goddesses, there was something different in there. There was no maps or anything, but there were aspects of the book in there, you know, don't panic on written on things, that basically just put a smile to my face. So there's another one. Now, if I was thinking about the next two, they were more to do with the value of things. So Elite had a lovely poster of all of the ships, and it had a novelia. Is it a novel? Which I did read, and the manual was pretty good, and it had a keyboard overlay. That's pretty good, but then again, the price of that in that box, even the tape version, was quite expensive. And another one that's quite equal to that would probably be, and I've cheated here, the Ultima series, the role-playing Ultima series, because they put things like little pouches with coins in and a cloth map in the early days. That turned into a paper map later on. But those games also had a very big time element to it, where you'd be playing it for weeks and probably wouldn't get to the end. Very early days of role-playing looks as rough as anything, but the box art for that and what you got inside the box was definite value. So hopefully that answers that. Now, Milfy Swinbuckle went in the opposite direction, wanted to know a question that I'll find very difficult, and that is, what are my top films, but ideally post 2000s? So my film collection, you know, I've been collecting Laserdiscs, VHS, DVDs, Blu-rays, 4K now, and I've bought films many, many times over, and they, being a nostalgic type of person, they all tend to be my youth and before, a bit like a historian, and things that have been in the year 2000 onwards have become less prominent in my mind. Enjoyable films, great films, don't get me wrong, but not so much in regards to whether I like them as much in a nostalgia way as a film that came out in the 80s and 70s and 60s and so forth. So reading them out, here we are. I'm pretty sure you'll recognize the names, so I won't go into detail, but they are in any order: Gladiator, Inception, any of the Lord of the Rings films, The Wrestler, A Beautiful Mind, Castaway, Kill Bill Volume 1, Wolf of Wall Street, a film called Get Out, that's quite modern, Wreck-It Ralph, an animated one just thrown in there, The Irishman, The 40-Year-Old Virgin as a comedy. Now, if you look at that list, they're probably actually between 2000 and 2010, and there's very few between 2010 and where we are now. And when it comes to comedies, you think to yourself, my God, the amount of comedies I've seen and how much I love comedies. There's very few in there that are comedies. If I think of the 80s, you know, I can name Trading Places, Ghostbusters, Animal House. You know, there are countless comedies, you know, Planes, Trains and Automobiles. And yet, when I think of comedies modern, I've got very few here. There's something about them. Maybe it was the fact that I like John Landis and certain directors, and they came out with more. And the later comedies that we're seeing now are equally funny, don't get me wrong. It's just that I don't see them as manic, maybe, or there's something about them. Something. That was not an easy list. And it took me possibly a day to come up with a final list. It actually had 30 and I pared it down. So the last part, what have I been doing? So I did manage to find some time to play on my Xbox, and I pulled out the Xbox Rare Replay disc, possibly because Mainmeister and I have been sort of like doing the 40-year anniversary of the Spectrum, and anybody that knows Rare was Ultimate Play the Game back in the day. It's actually a damn good value disc. It's worth having. And it was quite nice reminiscing on even on a newer console, looking at some of those old games on there. So had great fun there. I only bought one film this week, and there was one that was bought for me by my mother because she went into a charity store. So the one that she got from a charity store, which originally came from HMV, was Time After Time. That's an oldish film. What can I say about it? It's sort of like a guilty pleasure. It's a fantasy film. So what if H.G. Wells did invent his time machine, and one of his friends stole that time machine, and his friend just happened to be Jack the Ripper? That's a lot to say, isn't it? So yes, I definitely recommend watching that film. When I watched it in the early 80s, I was mesmerised by it. It's a guilty pleasure. Sometimes it's on bank holidays. I actually wanted the Blu-ray, so I bought that. One of the pre-orders, and I've bought it again. I don't know how many times I've bought this film. It's not like it's my favourite film either. But they came out with the 4K version of An American Werewolf in London in a big collector's set with a book and some art cards and how many extras. I don't know if you can freeze that, but there's a ton of extras. I've had this on Laserdisc, I've had this on VHS, I've had this on DVD, I've had this on Blu-ray. Then there was a Blu-ray remaster, and now there is another 4K remaster of the remaster. I think I'm going to end there with buying this film. It's almost like buying the Beatles albums over and over again. I have heard that this is the quintessential one to have. The colour references is great. It's a Dolby Atmos audio and video, so pretty looking forward to watching it one more time. I don't think it will be anything up until Easter though. And then what have I been listening to, because we're getting very close to the end? Panther happened to mention that he was a bit disappointed that I didn't like Norwegian thrash metal or something like that. My listening pleasure is manyfold, and I pulled this out of my CD collection to listen to this week. Joe Satriani's Surfing with the Alien. Now, no, I didn't buy that because it had Marvel Kirby art with the Silver Surfer. It was actually my friend Martin that introduced me to Joe Satriani. He said, you like your soundtracks, but you don't listen to too much guitar music. What do you think about listening to somebody that's mostly guitar and got very little in the background? It's almost pared down, but it is a an electric guitar. And I said, why not? He said, no, I recommend Surfing with the Alien because I think it's probably got a few tracks on there that would be more subtle for you. And so I bought it, and it was full price, and I listened to it, and I have to say, there were quite a few tracks on here that I absolutely loved. Satch Boogie, amongst many. So, Panther, I do like certain types of music, and there you are. I hope that sort of like thrown you a little bit. Then the next one goes back to what I was talking about last week, which is soundtracks. And most soundtracks I like to have a theme or a melody. Here's one by a person called Roy Budd, and it's Flight of the Doves, a 1970s film. Bit of a childhood film, you know, like The Railway Children and all of that sort of stuff. But Roy Budd, well, look him up. But he was big, a very big composer. Came up with a very melodic soundtrack. One where the theme is all the way through, probably in every track of a type. And of course, being Irish, it has an Irish element to it. Now, I hope that doesn't put you off, because I bought that as a vinyl from the BBC, believe it or not. They had a records department, and they sold off a lot of vinyl stuff during the 70s and 80s. Excuse me. And the vinyl that I've got of it, I think it's valued now at something like 130, 140 pounds. The CD came out, instantly sold out, and then had to be reissued. They didn't make enough of them. So, does that tell you something about the film and the soundtrack? Probably not a lot, but I do recommend that you listen to at least the main theme of Flight of the Doves. And the next one is a biggie. 3 films, same composer, with an underlying melodic track through all 3. They are the Rambo films. So you've got First Blood on the Entrada label, Rambo First Blood Part 2 on the Veresa Saraband label, and Rambo 3 on the Entrada label. Now these ones are a bit battered because they've been in the boxes, and to be quite honest, they've been moved from here to my house when I was in Manchester and then back again, put in boxes. The boxes have been put on top of other boxes and so forth. But I've also got the expanded version. So there are 2 types of things to listen to think about here. There was the vinyl when it came out with the cassette. There was the original releases, which were cut down quite a lot. When you consider a film is 2 hours long and you get about an hour's worth of music, you'd think to yourself, possibly that's about right. But actually, virtually every second of that film has got some type of music there. So it's actually nearly 2 hours of music, and a lot of cues were cut away. And then, of course, so the expanded suites are the ones that people want to get. They're numbered editions now. They're pretty hard to get hold of. If I could recommend you buy 3 soundtracks, which I don't think you'd find terrible, definitely pick up those 3. And of course, there's a nod to the Commodore 64 there for Panther and Rambo. So that's the end. A little bit over by about 2 minutes compared to last week. I hope you found this fun. Please keep sending the questions in. Last week I put a couple of links into some of the tracks that I was talking about on the CDs. I might do the same this time, so if you do fancy looking at the text of this blog, by all means do so. It will just hook up to a standard YouTube person that's uploaded the track. So hopefully you'll listen and enjoy them as much as I did. And until next week, bye-bye. Bye.